Welcome to the Big Fundamental Podcast, a Spurs podcast brought to you by Kins 5, the official station of the San Antonio Spurs. I'm Jackson Floyd, and joining us this week, we've got Evan Klosky.
What up?
And Tom Petrini.
How's it going, guys?
Guys, with just some breaking news right off the top here. We just learned in the last few hours that Keldon Johnson has made the Rising Stars rosters here. Tom, I just want to know real quickly, were you more excited to see that announcement or to see the announcement was made on Top Shot?
Well, it was interesting that they put it out on Top Shot, but, I mean, well earned for Keldon Johnson, right? I think it's pretty incredible that as the 29th pick, in that draft class, a loaded draft class with, the Zions and Jaws and Tyler Heroes and RJ Barretts and those kind of guys, Brandon Clark, he is one of those top 5 or 6 players from that draft class. And obviously a steal for the Spurs, a hugely impactful player, not just with, 14 and 7 per game, but the energy he plays with that energizes his teammates. Really, really happy for him. But yeah, also happy for anybody who bought the Keldon Johnson dunk over Kawhi Leonard and then saw the value immediately go up on the lowest ask to about $100 once the rosters were announced. So shout out to Keldon Johnson and anybody who believed enough to put some money on him there.
Yeah, and I mean it's awesome. It's great that Keldon Johnson and the San Antonio Spurs get national recognition. I didn't think it could happen. I didn't know that it was there was an ability to recognize a San Antonio Spur not named Tim Duncan. So great for the brand. And because they have the rosters USA versus World, that of course limits the ability of Devin Vassell to sneak in there. It's hard to argue with the list of names that that the 12-man roster was, but nonetheless, I would imagine that Devin Vassell is on that short list of what a replacement would look like. So that's saying anything.
Yeah, I mean, the San Antonio Spurs play in the Lone Star State, and for a while there, it felt like we were going to have 0 stars represented at All-Star Weekend. Again, now no DeMar DeRozan in that game, which
and game in italics because there is no game.
There's no game. It's a participation trophy. And
hey, congrats!
I want to see the games.
We'll see you later.
I would have liked to see the games. It's a stacked roster, as you're saying, Evan. I mean, it's a good company for Keldon to be in there. Projecting forward, any other Spurs besides Vassell who might make the roster next year?
I mean, Luka can make the World roster. It's not like the World has, that's a tougher roster to kind of build out. But Vassell, Luka, I mean, that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
And I think Vassell has a pretty darn good shot next year because a lot of sophomores are on the Team USA list. So they'll graduate, and Vassell, again, will get bumped up, assuming that he plays a similar role next year, which we all expect.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really excited to continue to watch Luka Samanic develop. I think that's kind of what you were getting at, Jackson, and I am absolutely ready for the Luka semantics segment of the show that I thought we weren't going to have to do for a while.
Save the pun to treat.
But
I'm the pun guy on the team. You can't come in here with semantics like that. How dare you?
I just did deal with it, and we're gonna talk about it now. We got to talk about Luka because one of the things that we've said many times on this show, right, is we're evaluating him for down the line. Like, what's he going to look like in a year?
Yeah,
that's why the Spurs drafted him.
Yeah, we've had a good chance to look at Luka as we've missed 5 players due to health and safety protocols. Got Keldon Johnson back last night versus the Knicks. That was kind of a welcome sight to see. I think the Spurs came out a little they seemed tired, sluggish from what was a surprising overtime game against the Nets, a hard-fought game there. I think they turned it on in the second half, but Keldon was the engine in that first half who kind of helped them. He brought the energy. He always brings the energy, but it was definitely present there in the first half there. Evan, what did you see from Keldon coming back? It didn't look like he was rusty at all.
No, you know, we knew that Keldon, even before the game, Popovich said, like, Keldon's not even really back, right? I mean, Keldon logged 11 minutes. It was really nice that the Spurs, eviscerated the Knicks in the second half, because it really gave Pop no reason to push Keldon any more than he should. 11 minutes, 4 of 6 shooting, 1 of 2 from deep, a couple of boards. And he actually logged a -3. He was the only player to log a minus in his time on the court. But nonetheless, I don't know what kind of expectations I had for Keldon. If he would have had this unbelievable performance, I think I would have been a bit surprised, to be honest. The guy hasn't played basketball in 2 weeks, so I'm not here ready to take any grandiose takes on how Keldon looked last night. I think that he looked good. And, nothing spectacular, nothing that makes me go, wow. But for a dude who has been in quarantine for 10-plus days and is getting his body right, I'm happy to see him back. He certainly helps, especially while the Spurs are still shorthanded and will be shorthanded, taking on the Thunder to end the first season.
Yeah.
I thought it was impressive. I thought it was impressive, the work that he put in the short time that he did play, because I'm picturing him just in a hotel room running back and forth from wall to wall like 20 feet just to get the energy out. Like he plays with such a manic energy, and in that first half he led the Spurs, I believe, with 9 points. Mm-hmm. He did pretty much all his damage in the first half there, and was a spark plug, as he always is. So I think that's been one of the true constants that you can always rely on. Every single Spurs game this year that he's played in, you can expect energy and effort and heart and hustle from Keldon Johnson. And most nights productivity too.
Yeah, and maybe for me, I guess, I take it a little bit for granted, because those are things that I expect from Keldon, right? It's not a surprise anymore. It's not something where I'm like, whoa, like, look at him. Like, if Keldon wasn't a spark plug, I would be questioning more things than when he is. That's just sort of the guy that we know Keldon Johnson is, and that's the player that we expect night in and night out. And he's that young, effervescent player that really gets every fan jacked up. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I think that if there's anybody who's going to be who's going to win the hearts of the fans in San Antonio, it's Keldon Johnson. He's going to be right there below Manu Ginobili. I think when his career is said and done, if he continues to do what he's doing.
Yeah, and I guess what I was alluding to was that energy in terms of being the engine there. I mean, we it sucks that he is on the minus there on the box score, but it's because he missed out on that second half swing there.
Yeah.
I think, Tom, you're correct. We don't really know what the effects quarantine has on their bodies, double-digit days, being stuck in a room and things like that. And that's why you see the Spurs easing players back in like Keldon. It sounds like, guys like Rudy Gay are still in quarantine. If you follow their social media, Rudy posted a picture to Instagram of himself, not of himself, sorry, of a skeleton, of a skeleton sitting on the bed looking out the window in a small room.
I hope it's not a picture of himself.
I will say this, that Pop said after the game against the Knicks that Rudy, Derek, and Devin were back around the team. He said that they will not be available for the game against the Thunder, but he did say that it was great to have their presence back, and that he said that Vassell was the furthest away from returning versus everybody else.
One thing that I think really jumped out in that Knicks game was this team is talented 1 through 15, right? And Evan, you were talking about Pop being stoked to get the guys just back on the bench and have their vibes, right?
Yeah.
This team is absolutely passing the vibe check at this point in the season, given all of the things stacked against them, right? They play a good game against Brooklyn, score the last 10 points of regulation, send it to overtime on a crazy shot by DeJounte Murray. Compete with a team that's been absolutely destroying most of the opponents that they face. So you have that, you come up just short, and then you have 10 guys score 8 or more points against the best defensive team in the league this year. Like, it's thoroughly impressive what the Spurs are doing right now. And I think it comes down to, they're playing for and with each other and, really believing in what they're doing.
Yeah.
So
we saw Trey Lyles lead the team in scoring with 18 points. He's the 7th guy, I think, to lead the Spurs in scoring this season, which is leads the league in a number of guys who, scoring leaders the team has had this season. Luka Samanic, career night for him. I don't know if this is where you guys want to start the Luka conversation.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Well, I just want to start it off by saying I am the most high on Luka, I think, going into this stretch. I feel validated. I feel like I don't want to go so far to say anyone owes me an apology, but I love Luka and I love what I saw from him in the last 2 games. Maybe I'm overreacting, Evan. Maybe it's just one game against the Knicks.
Look, you can run back the tape on everything I have ever said about Luka in this pod. All right. I've actually been the guy who has said, hey, everything that you've seen from Luka, do not overreact, right? He's learning. He's a project. In the short time that we did see him with the Spurs before returning from the bubble, he hasn't looked confident. There have been some question marks about an array of things in his game and whatever it might be. But no matter what, nobody in this pod was ever like, this guy stinks, bust, whatever. The world outside might have been saying that. There are tons of people down on Luka Samanic. I mean, you can read the prospect rankings for, I love Sam Facini and his work. His prospect rankings, he had Luka, I think, at his second to last for the Spurs as far as prospects go. And to me, that's crazy because, for me, we've always said he is the highest ceiling out of any prospect on the Spurs roster. He could arguably be one of the best players in the league if he really forms into the role that we all think he can form into. Having said that, the biggest surprise of Luka coming back from the bubble is his on-ball defense. More than anything, we know he can score points. The 14 points, all that stuff, that's just confidence. Like, shoot the ball. Do what you got to do offensively, when you have your opportunities. The on-ball defense has been remarkable. It's really been so much fun to watch him just stymie these monster opponents who I think the Spurs have really had trouble with ever since Kawhi Leonard left town. That has been the position that they've needed to restock and rebuild. And we discussed in an earlier pod, Luka's off-ball defense, still a bit of a question mark. He's still kind of learning the intricacies and the nuances of the NBA, especially for the San Antonio Spurs, which is, this is our system. This is how we're running it. We need you to be dialed in. That takes a lot of transition. But it's hard not to be excited with Luka and the growth that he's shown coming out of the bubble. And I think sending him to the bubble, again, was a tremendous move because I do think it recalibrated him to understand that, hey, I'm too good for the bubble life and I can do this. A reminder, like, you're a damn good player.
Yeah. Tom, does he ever go back to the bubble?
I hope not. I think he's shown enough in this stretch to where you have to keep him at this level because he's not going to do much more developing at the G League level at this point. He already averaged 22 and 11 there, showed what he's got, and he looks NBA ready now. He did not look NBA ready last year. He did not really look NBA ready at the beginning of this year in limited minutes he got. But given the opportunity here, he's making the most of it. And like Evan said, the defense has been just amazing for a guy that size to move as fluidly as he does, stay in front of the variety of offensive talents that he can stay in front of. He and Trey Lyles played really excellent defense against All-Star Julius Randle last night. And it's impressive to watch Samanic develop because he's built that muscle and he's also built the skill and confidence in that skill to where he's not thinking too much on either end of the floor. He's just doing what needs to be done. And so that's been really, really fun to watch with him.
His size is definitely a huge advantage for this guy. And that's kind of what we're talking about when we talk about the raw skill set he brings. What he does at his size is really impressive. There are a couple plays in the transition where he just gets his arms up and he's knocking balls down, causing havoc on the transition defense side of things against the Knicks last night. I mean, he was the guy who was bodying up Harden through stretches of the Nets game there, and his on-ball defense. And Harden, who is an amazing playmaker and an amazing dribbler and has knocked guys out of their shoes on several occasions. He kept up, and that's what you want to see from a second-year player in his, handful of games with the Spurs. I hope to see more of him. I hope to see more of Trey Lyles, and that comes at the expense of maybe phasing out LaMarcus Aldridge a bit. Seen him already relegated to the bench unit. I think there's still a strong presence for him on the bench, but there's going to be games like last night on the tail end of back-to-backs where you may not see Aldridge, and that's when you see guys like Samanic and Lyles relied upon more. Evan, what did you see from those two guys last night that stood out to you?
I mean, look, Trey Lyles is averaging 30 minutes, 11 and a half points. He's shooting nearly 50% from three. He's 9 of 20 in his last 4 games during this shorthanded stretch. Those percentages and what he's doing from the field have to decrease with more playing time. So I do tend to believe that he's playing a little above his head as far as that is concerned. He's averaging 6 rebounds as well. Something that Lyles will always be able to do is rebound the ball, which is a benefit for the Spurs, who rely on Keldon Johnson and DeJounte Murray to get defensive rebounds, because Jakob Poeltl is always challenging at the rim, which makes him pretty much meaningless on the defensive glass. I shouldn't say meaningless, but it's tough for him to get those boards when he's challenging those shots. So that is a benefit of Lyles. He's showing us what we loved about him last year, right? Pop a couple threes here, grab a couple boards there. He's not a monster usage guy, so he's really just going to fill in and do what's necessary. But yeah, I don't know. Look, when everybody comes back, giving Trey Lyles 30 minutes a game is just not feasible, nor do I think it's a good move long term. But as far as filling in minutes, I think he's a guy that could step in the Rudy Gay role. The only difference being is that Rudy Gay is way more of a pure scorer than Lyles is. So that it's tough. We talk about the depth all the time with this team, and just if we had to go nitty-gritty into each guy, it's tough to find replacement for that guy, because each guy does something that's just a little bit different than the other dude, even though there's similar heights and whatever it might be.
Yeah, I think with Lyles last night, we saw him at his best, and Samanic as well, right? Why did these two players succeed? It was because DeMar DeRozan and DeJounte Murray were attacking and had combined for 17 assists and 1 turnover between the two of them. Lonnie Walker showed off some of his impressive, underrated playmaking ability. And Trey and Luka are two players who, when they attack off the catch, they have the confidence to let that 3 fly. They each hit I think Lyles hit 4 or 6 from deep.
He did.
And Samanic hit a couple.
Samanic 3 of 5.
Right. And then when they're attacking off that catch, they both have enough moves to get to the rim and score pretty well. Like Trey Lyles in a straight line after he catches pump fakes, he's been a lot more decisive. There's a lot less of this, taking a couple of hesitant dribbles and then passing it off to somebody without creating an advantage. If he's driving to the rim, he's driving to the rim and, taking an aggressive look or getting it to somebody whose man has been forced to close out to him and protect the rim. So, he talked about playing off of those two and the opportunities that they create for him. But yeah, like Evan said, it's this is what we love to see about Lyles. This is the role that he was growing into, right? And if you asked Spurs fans a couple of weeks ago what they need, I'm sure many would have told you a versatile big man who can switch defensively, stay in front of different guys, and stretch the floor. And the Spurs have a couple of pretty good young ones in Trey Lyles and Luka Samanic. Like, Trey Lyles was a high draft pick. He's a productive NBA player. Luka Samanic, he hasn't shown that he can do that consistently yet. But if you bet that he would never do that, I would imagine that you're feeling pretty insecure in that bet now. It's not like he's gonna be a starter anytime soon, but he is definitely showing that he has potential and has grown. Like, I think the thing that has really blown me away with the defense is last year he was not quick enough to stay in front of smaller players and not strong enough to stay in front of bigger players. This year he's a little bit of both. And that has been like a crazy revelation. And Lyles too has improved defensively, I think, a great deal. Mm-hmm. So I think if they're both hitting shots and playing the way they're playing right now, they both got a spot in the rotation. But yeah, it becomes a question of who gets bounced out of it then.
So, and I will say this with Lyles, one thing I do want to see, which has been better these games, but I tend to believe that he gets a little burned sometimes from the 3-point line. But that's another thing. It's maybe a little nitpicky, but that is something that I keep my eye on. If you go back to the Oklahoma City game, like they didn't make any of them, but they was like, boom, attack Lyles, drive 3-point, like back up 3-pointer. So it's just something I keep my eye on.
He's better against the Zions and Julius Randles of the world, who would prefer to drive in, bully, use their big body. Yep. He's been pretty rock solid on the interior. I agree that there's some weakness on the perimeter there, but I think he covers drives out of those pretty well. Mm-hmm. So definitely an area for improvement for him. But I think overall defensively, especially this year, he's shown improvement to me at least.
So we've known that Samanic is clearly a key player in the Spurs' long-term role plans. It's him, it's Vassell, it's Johnson, it's Murray. These are the core, and Walker, the core 5 young guys they're building around. Has Lyles entered that conversation now as one of the guys you keep around for this long-term run, or is he still kind of on a tier below that?
Yeah, if you can make it work, I'm all for it. There's just a lot of question marks. We got to revisit this in the offseason because it just all depends on who you're bringing in, what the cap is going to look like, right? So, Lyles probably is going to demand around 5, 6, 7 million again. He's got 5.5 this year. I'd imagine that at least with this play and what I think his potential could be, a team would pay him 5.5 again at least. So, yeah, I would love that, but then on the flip side, I don't know if Trey Lyles would love to come back if he's going to be a reserve guy. So he might, want to go to another team where he's going to have an opportunity to play and, prove that this wasn't a fluke. So certainly somebody I'm very interested in the Spurs bringing back, but a lot of ancillary questions around that to really dictate, okay, let's 1,000% do this or that.
I was really Lyles coming into the season. I thought he was on a really awesome trajectory growing with this team before he missed the bubble with an appendix surgery. Like just a freak thing. I'm sure he would have fit in great with the bubble Spurs. And coming into this season, he couldn't really get in a flow, and he was behind a lot of other guys on the depth chart. Now with the opportunity, he's been starting these games. The Spurs trust him to start these games because he started the games last year. And he's showing what he can do. And I think when you have a core with guys like DeJounte and DeMar and Lonnie Walker, Derek White, these are dynamic playmakers who very much benefit from versatile big men who can be lob threats, be threats in the corner, be solid, respectable floor spacers and defenders around them. So, I think that, the fans that questioned why is Lyles even still here earlier in the season one, this season's crazy, and there might be a time when you lose 5 rotation guys due to COVID and need to, have the next guys step up. He's done great in that regard. Keita Bates-Diop was great last night. I love the way he plays. The Spurs are legitimately like 15 deep right now, and that's awesome. I think they might be the best 15 deep team in the league, but everybody knows you get to the playoffs, it's about 9 or 8 or 7 guys. So, the question becomes, how do you get minutes for all of these guys, and is there a logjam somewhere that needs to be cleared?
Yeah, and I totally, in naming off the Spurs' young core, left off 2 of the most important ones, Jakob Poeltl and Derek White, who might honestly be the 2 more talented of that group. Poeltl has just been amazing. I talked about him here in a second. I do just want to say, it's going to be interesting to see what happens when this team is at full strength. Whose minutes is Rudy Gay taking when the lineup comes back? Is that coming from Samanic? And then LaMarcus Aldridge is the big question.
Here's the thing about LaMarcus Aldridge, and the biggest question that I have coming down the stretch here, and something I haven't put on Twitter yet because I know I'm just going to be fueling the fire for so many Spurs fans out there, and it's going to come off as pandering to a large contingency. But Tom, and I'm going to ask you this question because I kind of know where I stand, but I want to know where you stand. Are we at the point where the Spurs could potentially trade LaMarcus Aldridge for peanuts, just as a favor to him, saying, hey, we are moving in a different direction. You're probably going to play like 10 minutes with us. And if you want out, we'll get you out, and we won't even be stingy about trading you. We will help you get to the location you want to get to. We'll take on an expiring deal, whatever we have to do, and this is our favor to you.
So I don't think it's quite at that point. I think that LaMarcus Aldridge still has a little bit left in the tank and a lot to contribute in a role off the bench if he can get comfortable and stay healthy in that role. I don't think it'll be 10 minutes for him. I think he'll be closer to 20. I think 21 points a game off the bench is probably not going to happen. I don't think 2 points is going to happen very often either. We talked a little bit last time about the benefits of him coming off the bench. Right? He can play the 4. He can post up a little more. He can play against inferior opposition, and that helps on both ends. So I think that the Aldridge doesn't have as much time to grow into this role as Luka Samanic does to grow into his. Like this timeline seems a little shorter, and I understand why people are rushing it a little bit, but they're still rushing it when they want to see immediate bona fide returns from Aldridge in this new job that he's doing. That he has kind of talked about the reasons that it's different than what he's done for his entire 15-year career. So when you have a guy that talented making an adjustment that big, I think you want to give some benefit of the doubt for at least a little bit and let him grow to that role and figure things out. But at the same time, the Spurs have proven they're better with Jakob Poeltl starting at center. I think that's obvious to everybody watching. But just because they've proven that doesn't mean that LaMarcus Aldridge all of a sudden has no value to the team. Mm-hmm. There's still something there for him.
Yeah, and I'll say on that point, I'm the one to propose a question, but you tweeted it out that Sports Illustrated did an article like the Spurs are doing their thing, and it was supposed to be a rebuild and all this stuff. And in the article, they mentioned LaMarcus Aldridge is struggling off the bench. Like, where did that come from? The guy, what does he play?
That was the one thing in that article. The whole rest of it I read, I was like, oh, this is actually pretty well informed. Like they're doing a good job here. And then I got to he struggled off the bench. I was like, he was struggling before that, and hence the bench part.
Yeah, I mean, like he was struggling that led him to the bench. We don't know what he
just got caught. Just got caught.
Yeah, so I agree. Like, I think that him moving to the bench is actually going to be better for LaMarcus and for the Spurs. I think LaMarcus is a dangerous player in the second unit. But I'm really happy that, unlike last year where the Spurs were stubborn as all heck, just leaving Bryn Forbes in that starting lineup no matter what, and they were going to live and die with him, they realized it wasn't working, and they had a defensive beast in Jakob Poeltl. He needs more minutes, and they have committed themselves to Jakob, and Poeltl has proved that is the right decision.
What makes the Aldridge decision seem so smart in hindsight is the fact that Poeltl has been really good this entire season, just in their secondary role, and then has been just tremendous as a starter from that point on. What he brings on the defensive side of the game, and his offense is pretty darn good too when he's not shooting a free throw. He's a monster in the pick and roll. Has proven that he can work in that role with Patty Mills or DeJounte Murray or DeMar DeRozan. And actually, Tom and I were looking at the 2016 draft earlier today to look at DeJounte Murray's numbers and how they stack up, and ended up being like, oh yeah, and there's Jakob Poeltl there too. Jakob Poeltl is second in win shares per 48 out of that draft class, just right behind Zubac, who doesn't count. I'm throwing Zubac out. So he leads the draft class in win shares per 48. He's top 5 in box plus minus, top 7 in VORP. And this is a stacked draft class. We're talking about the year that Ben Simmons and Jaylen Brown, all those guys were drafted. Even DeJounte Murray. There's a wealth of players in that draft.
Brandon Ingram. That was a good one.
Yeah,
Sabonis was in that one.
He was.
It was a loaded draft that the Phoenix Suns misfired 3 times on in the first round. So the Spurs have hit twice on players from that draft. So good for the Spurs there. Tom, you have some thoughts on what Poeltl's done this season as well?
So looking at the NBA's hustle stats in the month of February when Jakob Poeltl was starting, he played 29 minutes a game. He had nearly 6 screen assists a game, and that really doesn't do it justice because there are some plays where he sets 6 screens. I would not want to run around a Jakob Poeltl screen. Like he is a physical tone setter, a la Aaron Baines in that regard. So he's top 3 in the league in terms of screen assists per game in February. And then in terms of shot contests per game, 16, which is second in the league. He's 15% of the way through his 3-year, $27 million deal, already starting, already looking like a big old bargain for the Spurs. I know people in the beginning of the year when he was coming off the bench and he wasn't really playing well, it was like, well, why did they spend this money on him? They need to go trade for a center. Jakob Poeltl is pretty clearly saying that he's here to be the Spurs starting center for at least the next 2+ years. And the Spurs are better for it. I mean, he does so many things that don't show up in the box score that make this team better on both ends of the floor. And if you're a fan of basketball, you got to be a fan of watching Jakob Poeltl play. It's nuanced, and it's not as sexy as a 3-point shot, but I mean, there is something to be said for the brute strength and pure physicality of his game.
Yeah. I mean, we're getting close to that point where he reaches 24 minutes per game, which I like to talk about. On 538, the Raptor ratings, which, it's very complicated to explain. And if anybody's interested in knowing how those ratings are made, I'll send them a link. And it's a wonderful read if you're a nerd. But beyond that, it essentially, narrows down like who are the most valuable players on a team. How many wins are they adding over their replacement? And once Poeltl can cross into the 24 minutes per game threshold, he will be the league's best defender per Raptor by a full point over Rudy Gobert. So if you were looking at the chart of the Spurs, It's like there's Jakob Poeltl all the way up here because obviously he's not really a positive offensively. He's kind of like he's not really a true negative either. He's pretty much breaking even on that form. But it's like boop, like all the way up there at the top. It's just like as an outlier. And if you look at the NBA as a whole, when you look at that top little dot, that's Jakob Poeltl. So yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Year 3 of this contract, when Rudy Gobert is getting paid what, like $50 million a year by the Jazz, who's performing better? Is it Jakob Poeltl getting $7 million, or is it Rudy Gobert getting 7 times that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like in the NFL, right? Like it doesn't make much sense to pay big money to a running back. Right? I think that's what is kind of like the whole thing with center. It's like Rudy Gobert got that fat contract, and people are like, why are you giving him a fat contract? It's like, and Gobert's taking offense to it. It's like, dude, it's not that you're not good. It's not that you aren't all-star level. It's not that you don't have a huge impact on your team. It's just like, I can get Jakob Poeltl as a rim protector way cheaper and then use that money elsewhere. So that's no disrespect to Rudy Gobert, but it's like, the
Spurs have a Rudy Gobert at home.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, why would you go to Central Market and buy the organic French grape juice when you can get the Hill Country Fair purple drink, right? It's still pretty freaking delicious. So
serves the same purpose. But that was a great analogy that Evan made. You don't overpay for something that you can replace at a lower cost, and that it seems a little cold to break it down that way, but that's how it is, right?
Yeah.
The NBA, there's a premium on scoring, there's a premium on shooting and wing play. Gobert is a dirty work guy. Like the Andrew Bogut's and Aaron Baines's and Jakob Poeltl's and Rudy Gobert's of the world typically don't get paid a whole bunch. They do the dirty work that lets the other guys get all the shine and get good shots and, do their thing that other people show up to see. And then they, the nuanced fan, the fan of culture will watch that and say, that was a great screen by Bogut. You see that? That's what it is. And if you commit 5 years and like $200+ million to a guy whose job is that, it causes some cap considerations for you moving forward. Yeah. Whereas, I mean, we're seeing Jakob Poeltl be the anchor of a rapidly ascending Spurs defense here.
Yeah, and I want to say that Jakob Poeltl isn't perfect either, right? The big knock on Gobert, just like, first off, when the Jazz get to the playoffs, Gobert has shown warts in his game that he hasn't been a great player to lean on in the playoffs. We could totally get to that point with Poeltl, and Poeltl is having one of the worst seasons statistically from the free throw line. So what's going to happen is, especially during playoff time, you're not going to be able to play Jakob Poeltl for a good 4-minute stretch from minute 6 to minute 2 while that happens. Or you're going to have to continuously try to mix and match and get him into favorable spots. Becomes a bit of an issue. That is Jakob Poeltl's free throw making abilities is a huge problem. But hey, if the Spurs can get to the playoffs, we'll worry about it then. And it's at least whatever. But I just want to say that we're all on board of Jakob. He deserves all the praise. I will continue to give him that. But there are concerns, especially when it gets to playoffs and all that stuff, of what potentially is leading down the road of, hey, can you really play this guy late into games when they're just going to hack a Poeltl?
Yeah, I'm actually kind of surprised we haven't seen the hack a yak more so far this season, especially since he is 30% from the line, which is what I think in the top 5 all-time worst free throw shooting seasons, which is not a place you want to be. But Evan, I think you're right. When it comes to playoff time, teams are going to roll that out. But regardless, he's earned a spot in the starting lineup. He is shining there, and all other aspects, I would say. And I think Spurs fans are happy to see him there. It's working out. Spurs fans also are pretty happy to see Samanic get a start amid all the COVID protocols, which made me kind of wonder, guys, what's the Spurs starting 5 that would break Spurs Twitter? Who are the 5 guys that would just cause an epic meltdown? Pure joy.
This is easy. It's Murray, it's White, it's Keldon, it's Vassell, it's Samanic. I think that is the ultimate. Oh, sorry. No, I got to take one out because Pirtle's got to be in that. I guess.
Tough.
Okay, I'm taking. Oh, sorry. Okay, I'm going to take this. I'm going to take. Wow, I'm going to take Vassell out. Man, that's tough. That's really tough. Yeah, White, Murray, Keldon, Samanic, and Pirtle. I think that would be. If you want, I would just love to see. By the way, I don't know how many points they would score, but what on earth would it look like to see DeJounte, Derek, Vassell, Samanic, Yak?
Like, it'd be fun.
I'm here for
what kind of suffocating defense would we be watching with that?
The thing that I love about the young core that the Spurs have built here is, like, you know, you could put them all on a dartboard and close your eyes and throw 5 darts and hit like 5 guys and put together a lineup that would be fun to watch and like versatile and play good team basketball. Like, I think you would be hard pressed to find a bad lineup. Like, even if you start throwing, you know, Drew Eubanks in there, like Spurs Twitter loves Drew Eubanks. So this young core that they've built, in addition to being very good, is also just very likable. I think in terms of the guys who are the most like hot button, it's DeJounte Murray, Lonnie Walker, Luka Samanic, and then after that there's a drop off, right? Like, everybody else, I feel like most Spurs fans are on the same page about, like, you know, they really like the prospects moving forward. Those 3 players, DeJounte has silenced most of his critics this year. Lonnie and Luka are 2 of the higher ceiling players on this team, and still have a ways to go to proving that consistently. But, you know, I think the thing with evaluating both of those guys, evaluating any of these players, is if you're giving up on a talented athlete that the Spurs are taking young and developing in their system, I don't know what to tell you. Like, that just seems like a bad bet to me. That's not something that I would do. I wouldn't see that from afar and think, you know, oh, they probably screwed that up. Like, it's definitely wait and see. The Spurs, I think, have earned the benefit of the doubt when it comes to that. So, you know, we're seeing enough with Luka right now that's like, okay, he can be special, and we're seeing flashes of that with Lonnie too. Wish he could be more consistent, but you know, I think when he settles into a bench role eventually after the All-Star break, probably, we're going to see a more comfortable, more aggressive Lonnie Walker that, you know, continues to ascend.
Yeah. I will say this: we're gonna have. I don't know if it's today, but one of these days we're gonna have to have the Lonnie Walker discussion, because I do think that seeing him in the bench role is something I'm reserving my opinions on until I see that consistently. We got a sniff of it, and then all hell broke loose with the COVID cases. So I really want to see how he transitions into that bench role. His on-off numbers are really bad. You know, there's no going around the fact that when he's on the court, the Spurs are negatives, and when he's off the court, they're positives. There's a lot of mitigating factors also that explain some of that. But, yeah, it's just, you know, ultimately I really, you know, Lonnie's gotten cut since he's been with the Spurs, like really like shredded. I need him to bulk up his chest because there's just too much north and south against him that he just gets bully balled. I mean, like, I think, like, honestly, like, there's a lot of there's a ton of things he does great defensively, but when it comes down to the fact of him one-on-one versus somebody who's a little bit bigger, he gets crunched right to the basket, easy layup. And we've seen it time after time after time after time where it's becoming a weakness and it's becoming something that teams generally like to attack. So I'm not ready to make any grandiose takes. I'm just saying that, at some point we're going to have that discussion.
And I think maybe that's what we'll do during the All-Star break. Let's take a look at some of these, the hot button players, Tom, that you named off there, and address the questions that surround them. There's still questions surrounding, Derek White's health, his ability to stay on the court. There's questions about what to do with LaMarcus Aldridge. There won't be a game during All-Star Week, so that's what we'll talk about. But before we get to All-Star Week, there's one more game on the schedule, and I want to take a look at that game. But first, I just want to address a quick little housekeeping note here. Get a little inside baseball on you guys. The Big Fun Pod is kind of our passion projects at work. There's a lot that value to having this Spurs project, but I wouldn't say it's either any of ours full-time job. Evan, you do a lot with high school football, when the UTSA high school football and basketball, when the Roadrunners are playing, UTSA are playing, you do a lot with the coverage there. During winter storms, your coverage turns, to the San Antonio community and what's needed there. Tom, likewise, I mean, when things break outside of the Spurs, we have our fingers in a lot of other pies right now, and dealing with the COVID numbers, other local news as well. Yesterday, things went from 0 to 60 on us on the digital side and across the whole newsroom around 1:30 p.m. yesterday, when Texas Governor Greg Abbott announced his intentions to repeal statewide COVID restrictions put in place, such as business capacity limits and mask mandates. And that kind of led us to covering the after effects of that, the fallout from that. One of the things that was addressed is, the Spurs are welcoming fans back to the arena March 12th in the second half of the season. And their plan is, during the 17 home games that we're going to have at the AT&T Center in that second half, to have fans in the arena. At the time they made that announcement, it was before Abbott had kind of announced his intentions to take a step back on COVID restrictions, and safety measures and protocols were put in place by the Spurs Sports and Entertainment Organization. Yesterday, after the announcement, they said those restrictions are going to stay in place. Masks will be required inside the AT&T Center during home games. Capacity will remain to be limited, and those protocols they put in check are going to stay in place. So if you're planning on going to a Spurs game in the second half, be prepared to wear a mask. It's going to be required of you guys. Let's take a look at the game that's coming up here before we get to the All-Star break. What do you have on the slate?
Oklahoma City.
Oklahoma City. Let's go.
And DeJounte Murray with a great soundbite last night, right? Saying, quote, we owe them one. I believe that was the exact quote. So DeJounte was even joking, he's like, not only does he owe them one, but he also took a fine in that loss as well, which is funny. He was like, I could have donated that money, which I'm pretty sure all fines are donated anyway, right? Am I right on that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, not necessarily to the San Antonio community, but yeah, it was just, he was just like, all right, like I'm still – DeJounte's always one of those guys that when you ask him if you ask him about what he ate for breakfast, he's just like, hey, breakfast happened, I'm on to lunch. And then after lunch, we'll focus on dinner. But, right now I'm locked in on my tuna sandwich. So we really can't get anything out of him as far as previous results. But, at least him saying we owe them one is the small little glimpse into DeJounte still being pissed about that loss, which is something he really normally doesn't give us.
Right. He's equal parts on to the next one, and also I'm a competitor and I'm pissed.
Yeah.
And that was very much the vibe that he was giving off last night when he was talking about it. He was laughing, but it was the kind of laugh that was the laugh that somebody laughs before they beat somebody up. He's annoyed. He's genuinely annoyed that they lost that game. Right. Of course. It was a laugh that definitely belied some genuine upsetness behind it. That he was like, yeah, they got us, man. Ha ha ha.
So next time you guys talk to DeJounte, which one of you is asking about his breakfast? Are you?
That was good, Evan. I like that. I really did like that. But I mean, OKC is good. They're one of the lower teams in the West, but you can't look past them, right? Pop always says appropriate fear. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, good player. Lou Dort.
Arguably the most improved player award winner, right?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
And he's one of those guys who –
I mean, but DeJounte's for sure a top 5 in that category. Like, I mean, I don't know if Jaylen Brown is considered on that list. Like, Jaylen Brown would probably have to win it. But, like, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is, like, improved in, like, every offensive statistical category by a large margin.
Yeah. And he's setting himself up as one of those guys who, for years down the road, is going to score 40 points against the Spurs every time. Or there's always that fear that he's going to do that. Kyrie, for the longest time, was a guy, he comes in the building like, well, he's going to explode. Here comes another Kyrie bomb. I think Shai is kind of in that same mindset, that the mold that you have to worry about the fact that he could take over this game. John Morant's another guy like that too. The Spurs kind of have a weakness when it comes to facing off guys like that too. So be interesting to see what happens here. I'm glad the team is fired up. Like to see DeJounte Murray to kind of lead that emotional charge there. Remains to be seen if any of these players out for protocols return, though it sounds unlikely that we'll see any of them. So,
and Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, but Pop did say last night that none of those guys are returning. I'm almost certain he did say that.
Yes. Yeah. That's what he said.
So, you might get Keldon Johnson for 15 minutes. That's great. But, and Quindary Weatherspoon is into the G League bubble. I would argue right now with how the Spurs depth is and where the team is going, I would pretty much tend to believe that Quindary is going to get phased out next year. As they're going to go from 17 to 15, right? Rosters have expanded this year. I should, as far as their like game day rosters are concerned, but nonetheless, they're going to have a draft and they're going to need to add another roster spot, yada, yada, yada. It just, the demotion, I think Quindary should get playing time. That helps, but it's just reading the tea leaves. I tend to believe that I don't know if a spot is there for him anymore.
Yeah, I mean, he's a good player all around, a decent combo guard, does a little bit of everything, but it's hard to see him cracking the rotation with all of these other guys.
Yeah, and I think he should find a spot with another team. It's just like the Spurs are really tough. Like this is a really tough team to work your way into because the competition is so stiff, as we just talked about in depth, from like 1 to 15. Like Trey Jones is probably 15 on that list, and he's a guaranteed contract. So,
yeah.
Then you get Drew Eubanks, who's 14, and then like beyond that, we're getting into like Trey Lyles being like 13 or Samanic being 13. Yikes. That's not like a bad 13. Like it's not a cuttable 13. So,
right.
Yeah, I just, whatever. I digress. I just want to get that out because that was a shuffle that we saw.
Yeah, maybe Quindary then, maybe he's a guy you package with Aldridge and maybe you get a little bit more than peanuts, I need to look into
Quindary's not going to get you anything. You can package him and say, hey, here's a young piece too, but in the end, any team is probably going to have a chance. If they want him, they know they'll have a chance at him next year.
Yeah, true. Well, we've got the Thunder on the schedule, and then we're going to take a break for the All-Star break, but the pod will keep going. We're going to take a look at the biggest questions surrounding some of these Spurs players, such as Lonnie Walker and LaMarcus Aldridge will definitely be a guy we have to address. Tom, any final thoughts from you before we wrap it today?
Yeah, I think you could sum up my thoughts here by saying that the 18-13 San Antonio Spurs, who just beat the best defensive team in the league by 26 and took the Nets to overtime, they're just not that good. And, people should continue to just mainly ignore them. Just pretend like it's not happening. Pretend like you can't see it. No all-star recognition is fine. Really don't need that sort of stuff. They seem to care about it a little more this year, or at least let on that they care about it a little more this year than we've seen. And that might motivate them a little bit. But, keep sleeping and the fifth seed might wake some people up a little later on, but I'm excited to watch these guys continue to surprise people who said, "Wait a sec, I thought they were going to be bad this year."
Yeah, are we tanking? Is that the plan here from here on out? Evan, you got any final thoughts here?
Good.
Yeah, my final thoughts, honestly, is the Spurs got hit with a really crappy situation, lost, at least with Oklahoma City. They also didn't have DeMar DeRozan, but, it's not like they had like these supplemental pieces missing due to these COVID protocols, these health and safety protocols. I mean, you're missing White and Gay and Vassell and Keldon. I mean, just integral parts of this team. And for 4 games, this squad has just fought its what's off. And it's like really cool to see. And last year, I think Pop deserved a lot of criticism because he was stubborn. And I think there were a lot of things that Joe Schmo on the couch, just like us here, were saying that were very obvious, which were moves that the front office agreed with because people like Bellinelli and Forbes were not retained, right? I mean, that's just an obvious thing that, hey, these are guys who you shouldn't continue playing and whatever it might be. Having said that, the Spurs are back to being a top 5 defense, and they're back to doing the things that Pop prides himself on. And Pop's ability to really adjust and find winning formulas and to be open to change, to make the move to Pirtle to start, where I always thought that LaMarcus was going to come back and we just have to deal with him starting in maybe limited minutes because that's just Pop giving respect to the veteran. He's really changed course and he's adjusted all year in a year where adjustments are necessary. The team, the league average for defense is, I think, 112.5 points per possession. The Spurs are at 109. If you look at the last 15 games, the Spurs have given up more than 112 points 6 times. 2 of them were those weird games against the Grizzlies, which have become an outlier in back-to-back matchups where I don't know if Derek White's return really screwed them up, but it's possible. They lost to Golden State 114-91, so they barely got nudged across there, but just a rough performance. They gave up 124 to the Nets, but they didn't give up 112 before regulation, or they gave up 112 exactly, I should say, before overtime. And they gave up 114 to New Orleans, a team that just is so offensively gifted. And then they gave up 114 to Atlanta, which was a team that just used their entire bench unit to reach that mark. So everything is kind of, outside of Memphis and just a couple of points here or there. It's really impressive. And if you're a fan, you should just be proud. I don't know where the season's going. As I said, I think if they win a playoff round, you throw a parade sort of deal. But just the way that this team has fought for 4 games, completely shorthanded with lineups that should never really have been a thought in our minds before these health and protocols existed, just a big tip at the cap. And really interested to see how they end the first half of the season against OKC, a team where they should give them a little redemption.
That's Evan Klosky. You can catch him on Kins 5 behind the sports desk, breaking down everything Spurs related and sports related as well. And if you're looking for get into his DMs at Evan Klosky if you want to nerd out about Raptor and nerdy things like that. But if you want to do manly things like look at virtual sports cards on Top Shot, you get the Tom Petrini's wheelhouse here. That's
whoa.
Petrini.
I don't subscribe to gender roles, bro. Top Shot is a genderless experience for anybody who wants to invest in the future of collectibles.
And cryptocurrency.
At Real Tom Petrini is where you can find him on Twitter. I'm at JacksonKins5. And, of course, you can follow the Big Fun Pod at Big Fun Pod. The Big Fundamental Podcast is the official podcast of the Spurs from Kins 5, the official station of the San Antonio Spurs. And we'll see you next time.